So, first thing we're going to start off with is obviously very basic, the Warden's light attacks. The first thing that you want to know about his light attacks is that on side light attacks, they're always guaranteed a second damage. When they connect, you'll always be able to guarantee a second light attack on that. Now, the way you do that is the immediate time, right when your attack hits, a slight attack again, and that'll guarantee the second attack. Next one is the Warden's Top Light, which has parry properties, but the first part you want to know is it's the fastest attack the Warden has, and usually what you'll do to interrupt an opponent who's doing a heavy attack or a shove or something like that. Okay, next part we're going to go over is the heavies, and the fact that his heavies chain, so essentially once you swing one, you can swing another one. Now this is useful for if you're out of range from an opponent, you're playing an assassin. A lot of times, a lot of people expect is that you're going to move in for an attack. So if you're out of range, you can move in a lot closer and swing the second one. And oftentimes, what they'll do is they'll try to move in, throw a light attack or something, and sometimes you can catch them. Against higher level opponents, obviously you'll want to feint that second one, but it can be useful for baiting out parries. And the other part that you want to know about his heavy attacks is the side heavies are faster than your top heavy. Top heavy is the slowest attack that the Warden has, however it deals the most damage to the Warden. Slightly more than Crushing Counter-Strike even, which we'll get into. But it slows balls and will get parried every time out of neutral, so I wouldn't recommend throwing that out of neutral. Next we're going to go into probably what everyone considers the most annoying part about Warden, which is the shoulder bash, and how it has the 25, 25, 25, 25. What that essentially means is when Warden casts it, he can either straight up let it go and do a normal shoulder bash, like so. He can cancel it. He can feint it into a guard break. Or you can charge it to send your opponent flying to the max distance that you can. Now if you're near a wall, that will wall splat your opponent and allow you to gain a top heavy. But something else you want to know about that is the charge. If you hold it up, so right when you see the white super armor appear on your character, right there, it'll guarantee a top heavy even out of an open field. So the instant you see the white, you let it go, and you do a top heavy. You have to hit him with the fully charged one. So that doesn't usually happen right when they happen. We both happen to release right at the exact same time. Totally never seen that hurt, by the way. Usually what happens, one person will have charged it slightly longer than the other person. They'll get priority, but that was interesting. I've never seen the bounce like that. But anyways, you want to hold it till you get the white super armor, and then you can release and do your top hit. So now what I want you guys to do is the shoulder bash cancel. Now the shoulder bash cancel is done by basically doing the same thing that you would to initiate a shoulder bash, but instead right at the start you have to press the feint button. That'll allow you to cast shoulder bash, make it look like you're going for it, but then you feint it at the last second. One of the things, this is a really huge strength of the Warden, is that against assassins, all the time when you do this, what they're going to do is their dodge attack, because that's oftentimes the safest thing they can do to counteract your shoulder bash. But what you can do is cancel this, they go for that dodge attack, they can't whiff it, or they can't fake it, so you can parry that. And against other opponents like another Warden or someone else, you can always do this kind of thing, where you keep them guessing at when you're actually going to release it, and then randomly during that chain, when you're faking, you just let it go. And then your opponent goes, what the hell? Just constantly be dash, 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 and then eventually let it go. And release it whenever you feel that they might not dodge it, kind of thing.
Trying to get.
Just remember that the charge in and of itself, you don't have to hold your guard break button during the initial startup. The only time you'd hold the guard break button when you initiate the charge is if you're planning on full charging it. So basically you can just tap it. Whenever you go for the shoulder bash, you just have to tap guard break. That'll allow you to get it off quicker. The next part of the 25 is simply doing guard break after a shoulder bash initiation. This is the same as feinting. It has to be done right at the start, but it allows you to feint a guard break or feint a shoulder bash into a guard break. And this can be done quite quickly. And this is what you use if your opponent has been trained against you to constantly try to dodge your shoulder bashes. This can be used to catch them. So when the shoulder bash starts, you see the character go into flames, hit shoulder guard break again. Usually what I do to guarantee that I'll get that guard break into it is I'll basically triple tap the button. So I'll be like tap tap tap, and that'll guarantee that that guard break's gonna come out.
Okay.
So when you go to initiate, you're like tap tap tap, and then you'll get it.
Yeah, I see.
The last part of the 25, obviously, is just simply releasing it right out of it. This is just done by simply tapping the button. So now comes the vortex, the constant vortex. When you land a shoulder bash, you can follow it up with a guaranteed side light. This is why I went over the double guaranteed side lights at the start. Now what this does, essentially, is shoulder bash can be initiated through a few different ways. You guys already know the dodge method, which we were just practicing. The other method is simply after a light attack, it can be done. Light attack, and you can cast your shoulder bash. And why that's important is that allows you to continually shoulder bash with your light attacks, also known as the vortex. And every time you initiate said shoulder bash, you can always mix it up however you want. Light attack, guard break. There you go. Now keep in mind, this vortex isn't guaranteed. You can continue that chain. That chain will continue forever, but your opponent, after they get hit by the side lights, will have an opportunity to dodge. And this is where the mix-ups that we talked about, the 25-25, 25-25, comes into play. Whenever you land that first shoulder bash into side light, you have basically 4 options in front of you. Release another shoulder bash into their face. That's against an opponent who refuses to dodge. You can cancel into a guard break to catch your opponent off guard, which is what I like to do a lot of the time because people won't expect it when they first face you. They'll be like, alright, he hit me with a shoulder bash, I gotta dodge now. So you can catch them. The third option is just cancel it, expecting them to maybe do a dash attack, or they maybe go for they go for a light attack to try to knock you out of it. Keep in mind the shoulder bash will not have it doesn't have super armor on the startup. Or you can go for the charged one. Now the reason the charged one can sometimes be useful is, say for example, your opponent is dodging. Well, you can either do the shoulder bash into guard break, or you charge it and hit them and do the top heavy. That'll catch your opponent if they're trying to prediction dodge, which is what a lot of people end up doing because they get scared of getting caught in the vortex. So this is specific to fighting against Warden. This goes for any class. I'm going to teach you how to get out of the vortex. I've already showed a few of you guys how to do this. But this is how you can always guarantee that you're going to free yourself from that vortex mix-up if you just don't want to play the mind game. What that entails is simply after your opponent lands double light attack on you, after their shoulder bash, you unlock and roll away. Now we're going to show the folks here, so do the shoulder bash. No matter what combo that he throws after that, nothing can land because of the way that the unlock roll does. If your opponent dodges, that whole entire duration that you're still charging forward, they can guard break you during it. And any class can do this. It doesn't matter how slow they are. Even the Highlander can dash and still guard break you. Now we're going to go over the chains. There's not many, but the important thing is to know them so that in your movesets, like most classes, you won't really use these except for like once or twice if you're like whiffing at the air. We've already gone over one. That's the heavy attack, how it can chain twice. That's important for catching your opponent sometimes and faking an attack. But essentially, 2 heavies can chain. It doesn't matter what direction, it doesn't matter what way you do it. Those 2 heavies can constantly chain on your opponent. So you can cast 2 side heavies from the same direction, doesn't matter. That kind of thing. Next chain is the light attack. Now this one is arguably the most important because essentially Warden has the ability to, I'm just doing your prayer real quick. After you land these 2 lights, you can throw a heavy. Now that's important against opponents after you've landed the shoulder bash that we were just going over. You land those 2 lights after your shoulder bash, you can throw a heavy. Now, in most cases, I usually feint that to get a parry attempt or something like that. That's a little more advanced. The first thing you want to do is get down the fact that you can throw that heavy after your light attack. If you're like this distance, like what a lot of fights is people will do a backdash and they'll usually end up somewhere around like this distance. What you can do is close that distance and you can get that light attack in, the second one, and your opponent won't expect it. This is important for top light especially because top light is pretty quick, and when you're far enough away from your opponent you can throw it and then throw another one and your opponent will be like kind of caught off guard. At the last chain is just simply doing one light attack and then throwing a heavy. And the main time you'll use these chains that we're talking about right now is from the shoulder bash. So after you land that shoulder bash, you can follow it up with something like this. So I'm going to do it on Poex here real quick. Essentially, after you land that shoulder bash, you can do something like this, and your opponent will be expecting you to do other things. So expecting you to do the standard vortex, which is just that vortex. But instead of throwing that last attack, you'll throw a heavy that can often catch your opponent off guard. Because this move is so goddamn slow that your opponent often the time won't even, like, they'll try to parry it, but they'll usually mess up the parry timing. You'd be surprised how many opponents mess up that top heavy parry timing just because it's so much slower than every other attack in Warden's kit. Now we're almost to parries, but the first thing I want to go over really quickly is the guard break. So what you do from a guard break, now this is important for Warden because he has a few different options. So I'm going to demonstrate on Poex here. He has essentially 3 different options. He has the standard guard break, which is to kick your opponent away from you. This guarantees you nothing, unless you're near a wall that they can splat against, but even then, it won't guarantee you much. Now what I mean by that is, if I were to kick him into the wall here, the amount of time that I'm stumbled from doing it is almost equal to the amount of time he's stumbled on the wall. And the main thing you're looking for from a wall splat is the side throw, which is simply done with throwing in any direction other than forward. And that will allow you to throw an attack as well as your guard break. So you throw it aside and you can throw a top heavy. This is the only time that top heavy is quote unquote guaranteed. The other option, the last one, and one that I rarely use because it stumbles you for a really long time, is the back throw. This is the one where he fully throws them around behind him. This throw has 2 problems with it. One, it throws them the same distance as most of your throws, which you could say is good, but at the same time, it just basically gives you nothing because your opponent, when they get thrown, if you look at where he is, he's essentially more than a dash away from you when I threw him there. So like, again, there's a dash, and then so my attack will basically whiff when I try to throw it at him from there. So the throw I never use unless I'm like back to a wall kind of deal thing, where you can throw them into a wall. But you'll find it's less reliable than the side throw, just because the amount of time your character is there is based on animation. The forward and back, generally the only time you'll use them is to try to throw your opponent off of a particular, thing. Or if they're, the only direction you can get a wall splat off of is in those directions. And the last part about that is every wall splat is a top heavy is what you want to go for. What I found is depending on which direction you're throwing your opponent, so like right here, if you'll notice, my character's body stance, I'm facing the wall right now. But if I'm facing this way, for example, and I throw him and I try to switch to top, it switches slower. Now I still hit him there because I did it really quickly, but I found that sometimes through delay or whatever, sometimes when you switch to that top guard, I guess the timing is too slow. So let's try it again. Just try to block it.
Sonic team here.
Yeah. So there, it failed. When your body is facing away from the wall, a lot of the time what will happen is because of the animation how your character switches, it will limit your ability to essentially switch guard. And also another thing to keep in mind is this is similar to every character. If you accidentally, and I do this all the time, but if you accidentally, when you're switching to that top guard, you for some reason switch left than top, that'll delay it by a lot. And that will always guarantee that you won't get it. We've gone over guard breaks in a short essence. Essentially, you just want to try to use the sideways or diagonal throws because they'll allow you more time and ability to do stuff off of them. And like any other character, your guard break, all that allows you when you do land a guard break is either you can do the heavy attack, or you can do a light attack to start your combo and start off your shoulder bash mix-up. Those are the only two options that you have off of guard break by itself, instead of a wall splat kind of deal. The next part, for Warden specifically, is when to throw in some feints. Now we've kind of already gone over this a little bit in some of the startup example, but a good time to feint for Warden is the second heavy. So you throw a heavy out of neutral and throw another one and you feint it to try to bait your opponent into something. Generally, a lot of the Warden's feints you want to, a lot of the Warden's heavies you want to feint. And the best one to feint is top heavy because of what we're going to go into next, which is parrying / crushing counter strike. What you can do is throw a top heavy and your opponent will respond by trying to parry. This will allow you to get crushing counter strike, which is essentially similar to a parry in timing. It's a little tighter, but it's a top light attack at the moment that you would normally parry an attack. So once you've mastered the timing for crushing counter strike, the reason crushing counter strike is so useful is that, one, it deals a crap ton of damage. What it does is almost the same damage as top heavy. So it's the second most damaging attack, and it's from a parry. Now there are times that you don't want to use crushing counter strike, but a general rule for Warden is get in the habit of whenever you go for a top parry, always go for the light instead of your head attack. Essentially what you want to do is you're trying to bait out the opponent's crushing counter strike, and you'll throw your own to catch them. Now this is very particular, and the timing is even more strict because you have to feint and then wait like a second and then hit your crushing counter strike. And you just want to practice this. Now, with crushing counter strike, what we just went over, the next part after you land a crushing counter strike is to follow that up with your shoulder bash combo. But that shoulder bash after crushing counter strike is guaranteed, as well as the side lights that come after that. So technically, keep in mind, technically, crushing counter strike is the second most damaging ability that the Warden has. But when you add in the two lights that come after it that are guaranteed, as long as you hit that shoulder, it deals slightly more damage than your top heavy. Alright.
You want to keep your top guard as long as you possibly can. Then parry to the side and a flick, because you want to be able to maintain your ability to do your crushing counter.
This will be useful. This will be useful for multiple classes, not just Warden. Being able to flick parry is an essential tool to the mainstay of this game. And this also will bait your opponent, because a lot of opponents will see that you're guarding top and be like, oh, I can take advantage of this, I can throw an attack to the side, and then you just flick your guard and parry. The last thing I'm going to go over is whenever you go for a parry attempt, no matter what it is, you want to have the ability to always feint your parry attempts. So always just have it in the back of your mind that you don't want to commit to that attack, because all it's going to leave you is open to another attack. You want to have the ability to respond. Might be helpful to you guys, just so you can know, is overall how to play defensively. Whenever I'm playing defensively, like with any character, we've already gone over the fact that I tend to like to keep my guard top so I can get those crushing counter strikes in whenever I need them to. And I've already talked about the fact that every time you want to go for a parry, you always try to feint your parry attempt if it is indeed, them feinting their attack. But the other thing you want to do when you're playing defensive, you want that habit of basically you dash back to avoid the heavy attack, and then you do your guard break. Now obviously we're too close right now when I'm trying to explain it, but fast enough. There you go.
Nice job.
There you go. The next part I'll show is what's more important, arguably, is playing aggressively against your opponent. Now this is where everything that I've talked about will come into play, and essentially it's just making sure that you mix in a lot of these different moves that we've talked about. But one example that I'll first go over is the feinted top heavy into a dash shoulder bash. So we throw the heavy attack feint and dodge and shoulder bash. I'm going to just act like someone who feinted their attempt. You catch them during their feint even. That's part for playing aggressive, and these will be things you'll pick up as you play the class itself. You'll learn, like, you know, what you want to do, etc., etc. I'm just trying to give you some, you know, quick pointers on what's useful and what I like to do. But a lot of the time, you'll come into that feint game for your shoulder bash, where you'll dash to your opponent feint and then dash to the side and shoulder bash. This can be useful to catch your opponent who likes to dodge early, or even an opponent who wants to go with their own shove. Say you're fighting against another Warden, you're fighting against another Lawbringer. A lot of times their response is to dash out of the way and shove you to try to get their advantage started. That's what usually will happen. You'll be able to catch your opponent as they're trying to do their shove. It won't work against everyone, but a few times if you keep doing that against your opponent where they're like, when is he going to release it kind of thing, and they're trying to get their shove in, you can land it a lot of the time. Now keep in mind, this is susceptible to guard breaks, so obviously if you're doing this in front of their face, they'll probably just guard break you. But you'll do this slightly out of range from their guard break to try to catch them off guard. The last part that I wanted to go over for the Warden specifically is the Warden's running slash, which is pretty simple. It's just his heavy attack when you're running. This is useful to catch your opponent if they're trying to run away from you. And it hones in pretty darn hard. You see, I wasn't even looking at Herrick right there, and I ran past him. Like, I could run probably over here, and yeah, it turns all the way around and hits him. The tracking on this thing is pretty nice. And then, aside from it just being good for doing that, what you can do a lot of the time is you'll run at your opponent, they'll expect you to do this. Now keep in mind it comes out from the same direction every time, so your opponent can punish it. But if you just run up to your opponent, pretend like you're going to do that, and instead you just guard break them, you can catch your opponent off guard a lot.